Hello and welcome back to another video here on the channel. Guys, today we had sun. And it's gone right now. There it is, gone. But we had sun almost all day today, and it was so amazing because, y'all, in Michigan, we get very, very little sun in the winter, which is why people are just craving the summer. I'm not really huge on summer because I don't love the heat, but I love the sun. And it can be easy to take advantage of or to take for granted the sun. And then you hit summer in Michigan and you're like, it's just so disappointing. I had so many friends reach out to me and let me know how they were using their sun time because it's so few and far between, and it was kind of a special treat today in the end of February. Today, we're not going to talk about a particular issue or a particular event that has happened in politics, but we are going to talk about something in the political American Western landscape, per se, that is really frustrating to me and that drives me absolutely bananas, which is this polarization, I'm always right, you're always wrong sort of mentality, and this knee-jerk reaction to the opposite side. If you're a conservative, then anything that comes out of the liberal mouth that says, hey, this matters, or this is important, or we should care about this, is suddenly like, no, we shouldn't, that's not how we should deal with it, no, blah, you're wrong all the time. And I think this is so stupid and doesn't really push us to use any critical thought. We're just, kind of a mouthpiece to a particular party instead of actually pausing and saying, one, is this true? Is this factual? Am I treating this source as diligently as I would something else? Am I being influenced by partiality and an intentional bias in a non-biblical way, right? Of course, every human being has a bias. If I have not said that yet, let me emphasize that. Every single human being has a bias. But if we're intentionally putting a bias on a particular partiality of a party or a person, then that's not biblical and that's not right. And we're inevitably going to be disappointed if we're putting our, exclusive loyalty and trust in a particular politician or a particular leader, however, righteous they may be. If we look at somebody like David, he's been pulled in to this last election quite a lot as the comparison to our current president of the United States, which I think is just ridiculous. Ridiculous. But even David, who was loved by God and, was righteous before the Lord in so many situations, even he sinned. Even he, committed some horrendous sins, and there were serious consequences for that. If people trusted in David because of David, then they would be disappointed and devastated. But if they trusted in David because the Lord had put him in place, and so ultimately their trust in him was trust in God, not really truly David. In other words, David's goodness wasn't because of David, but because of God, then there wasn't this disappointment when man would fall in sin. Obviously, there's grief and there's consequences of our sin, and that's not to, dismiss or undermine that. But there's a different kind of grief and sadness that we feel when we are experiencing the consequences of someone's sin versus experiencing the consequences of someone's sin that we have put our entire trust and our entire purpose and our entire identity in. And that's what I'm really concerned about for Christians in this particular political era, is a total trust in a man or a total trust in a particular party or a particular source of media, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I think that a great solution to this problem would be some good old critical thought and discernment, which means we pause. We say, wait a minute, where is the source coming from? What is their own particular bias? And am I treating the information that I'm receiving with the same diligence and thought and groundedness as I would with something that I received that I didn't necessarily trust that source, or I had a little bit more, critiquing energy about that particular source or that particular media or person. And this is a good example. I think, one of the things that I'm noticing a lot with social media right now is there's so much information coming at us. It is so easy to just react and assume that something is correct or something really happened. I mean, in the last 6+ months, we have had so many things that have come at us in our social media feeds that weren't even true, that didn't even actually happen. And so you have to pause and say, wait a minute, hold up. What's actually going on? What's actually happening? And am I going through the due diligence of discernment and critical thought and making sure that my own integrity is coming from a place of wanting to honor the Lord, which means truth. Truth has to be at the forefront of what we celebrate and what we acknowledge and what our relationships and our conversations. And, truth is the center of everything, right? Because God is the source of truth. I mean, this is why in marriages and relationships where, someone's wanting to get married or, be with this person for the rest of their life, if lies are at the center of it, if there isn't trust and truth, then that relationship crumbles and falls. And the same is true for our relationship with what we put out, what we share, what we communicate, how we handle conversations, how we debate, how we disagree. And that kind of rolls us into what I call the art of disagreement, which is something that is lost, but we can find it again. Again, this polarization of a two-party system and, liberal versus conservative and all the talking points and, just kind of being a puppet for your party and your cause, that creates an intentional bias and a blind spot to our ability to discern and have wisdom, not really be thoughtful and discerning. And part of what we as believers are responsible for is our witness, our testimony before the Lord and before man, to show people the difference between the Holy Spirit being in us versus living without the Holy Spirit, and how we model conversations and how we model disagreements and how we give grace and listen and care and be thoughtful for human beings, have an honor and respect for them because we love their Creator. That is something that should be like an iconic element of Christianity, an iconic element of being someone who is Spirit-filled, who is the Lord's. And if we're acting just like the world in our disagreements and in our anger and reactions to everything that's going on in the world, then how are they seeing anything different? And in fact, they're not seeing anything different. They're seeing just exactly the same anger and intentional blind spots and arrogance that they're experiencing with everyone else in their life. Yet we have this opportunity to allow the Holy Spirit to work through us, to have a response that is gentle, that is gracious, and that is curious. It's funny, I'm making this video just as much for myself as anyone else, because I have had several conversations, even in the last 24 hours, with individuals that really frustrate me, and learning how to say, wait a minute, pause. Did we listen first? Did we listen with neutrality? Did we listen with grace and love and kind of a pretense of believing them? In other words, putting like giving them a chance, giving them a shot, right? Not exactly the word that I want to use, but kind of the same principle, right? Are we giving them a chance to make sense? Are we giving them a chance to be able to find some common ground and agree? And the reality is the truth is, this gives us the freedom to disagree, because when we can find some common ground and really honor the person and find something to honor in their particular opinions or thoughts, something common grace like to celebrate about their thought process or what they're concerned about or what they care about, then our conversations about what we divide on and what we disagree with can be met with a welcoming hand, a welcoming tone, a welcoming dynamic to the conversation. And I have found that this works with so many people. There are always going to be those people that really, really drive you wild and that don't necessarily want to receive the grace or the kindness from you. They just want to yell and be mad and angry and whatnot. But most of the time, people just want to be heard. And when we can listen and understand and then be able to bring our own thoughts or perspectives where we may divide, there is that respect and honor established that God is glorified in and is pleased with when we are loving and caring for an image bearer of God, whether that is someone who is the Lord's because they are saved, or an image bearer of God because they are created and they're a human being and they have, this beautiful image bearer likeness of God because he has designed them that way. And this is just an encouragement for you. Maybe this weekend you're going to go into some conversations or some discourse with particular people that are going to be challenging. I just want to encourage you to pause before we, react and get angry and frustrated and aggressive towards each other, and really say, wait a minute, Lord, how can I respond to this in a way that would honor you and that would create discernment and thought and, a desire for wisdom, a desire for truth in this conversation. And that has been my prayer for the last several months of this YouTube channel and everything that I write online, whether it's political or it's, about Christian living, whatever it is, right? Being able to stimulate the desire and the respect for truth, discernment, and where truth and discernment come from. Ultimately, God himself. That's what I pray you get from my videos. Obviously, there's some things that I may miss that on. But ultimately, when we can be like this as believers, we are representing and modeling what it's like to have grace and truth be the forefront and the cornerstone of how we converse and how we're in relationships. And that's really important, and that will be a game changer to the dynamics that you have with the people around you that you care about most. All right. I'll see you on the next video.